what extent have our ideas of justice, freedom, equality, etc., been impacted by colonialism? Have our current notions of critical thinking and scientific acumen also been influenced by it?
This is an extremely important question because any answer to this is capable of being misrepresented in very different ways. So, I've seen certain reactions to my book coming from certain quarters which perhaps have not read the book enough or who have not paid enough attention to the detail and the nuance in the book. So, मैं अपने position को, and I'll be switching to Hindi often during the course of this to keep this as decolonialized as possible. Now, the point is, uh, I am taking the very clear position in the book that it's not as if we don't have our own values of samata, or let's say justice, or rights and individual rights, as well as societal duty, so to speak. We have had all these concepts. So, my primary objection to a European standard being presented as the universal standard is that it effectively takes away my ability to present an Indic perspective as part of a discussion on these subjects. So, जब भी एक यूनिवर्सल मापदंड की बात होती है और आपसे ये कहा जाता है कि आपसे बातचीत नहीं होगी, लेकिन हम आपके लिए तय करेंगे कि आपके समाज के लिए क्या अच्छा है, then effectively it is not a universal standard, but it is a local standard which is being universalized. Okay? किसी एक कल्चर या किसी एक समुदाय या किसी एक सभ्यता के एक्सपीरियंस को आपने पूरे मानव जाति के सभ्यता का एक्सपीरियंस बना दिया है, okay, without giving us an opportunity to contribute to the discussion. Okay, assume for a moment that certain standards are laid down with respect to nuclear proliferation or disarmament. What is your basic position? आपने ये कैसे तय कर लिया बिना हमें वहां पे बैठने दिए? You should have actually given us an opportunity to sit at the particular table and contribute to the discussions. हो सकता है कि अंत में हमारी बात न मानी जाए, but at least we should be heard, right? I am applying the same logic to discussions relating to universal standards of civilization or universal standards of equality. So, my fundamental position is not that there is no such thing as a universal standard possible. In fact, I've said so on page 103 of my book that universal standards, first of all, if possible and desirable, must take into account our positions also. So, when I make this statement, इसका तात्पर्य ये है that I am taking the conscious position that the current standards that we apply to these issues in the Indian discourse are as far as away as possible from the Indic perspective, because we have effectively allowed our standards to be fashioned by a Western framework. Okay, so agar koi kehta hai that no, but had it not been for the European, Indians would not have had the concept of an individual right, then how I mean, what a terrible opinion you seem to have about your culture, which apart from being grossly unfair to the culture and its contributions to individuality and spirituality, is completely ignorant. क्या पढ़ के आपने तय किया कि भारतीय संस्कृति या सभ्यता के अंदर इंडिविजुअल राइट्स का उसकी कोई मान्यता नहीं है? We don't have a position for it. On what basis did you decide any of that? Okay, so to answer the question, there are two responses. One, I do believe that our current standards and our discourse surrounding these issues is certainly influenced significantly by European colonial consciousness, and therefore there is a significant Western influence on these subjects. Second, it is not my position that we must not be open to ideas from outside. However, it is certainly my position that before you choose to slavishly import a principle from outside, the first question as a self-respecting culture which wants to occupy the position of Vishwaguru, अगर आप किसी और को सिखाना चाहते हैं कुछ, पहले अपने आप से ये तो सवाल कर लीजिए कि आपके पास सिखाने लायक कुछ है या नहीं. That means हर मुद्दे पे आपको सवाल सबसे पहले अपने आप से करना चाहिए कि मेरे सभ्यता या संस्कृति या मेरी जो विचारधारा है या जो वर्ल्ड व्यू है, उसके अंदर से कोई इंस्पिरेशन निकल सकता है कि नहीं किसी मुद्दे पे. अगर आपके पास किसी इशू का कोई सोल्यूशन नहीं होता है, that is when you start looking for solutions outside. Which is to say, as a culture, I don't seem to have the basic building blocks of creating a solution to address a problem. Therefore, I need inspiration from outside. Unfortunately, the approach is typically the reverse. आप देखना ही बाहर से शुरू करते हैं. Okay. And whenever we discuss any policy related issues or any issues relating to development or science, there is no question of looking at us within. Now, let's take this argument to the aspect of science also. एक सीधा उदाहरण ये है, होम्योपैथी तो भारतीय स्कूल ऑफ साइंस नहीं है, लेकिन जब आयुर्वेद की बात होती है, हाउ डू इंडियन डॉक्टर्स ट्रीट आयुर्वेदा इटसेल्फ? They treat them as second rate quacks, not even as medical practitioners. Despite the fact that under the Ayush department, the government of India, under the previous dispensation, has clearly recognized the position of Ayurvedic practitioners also as equally entitled to practice medicine in this country. उनको so-called allopathic practitioners उनको क्या दर्जा देते हैं, उनको क्या respect देते हैं, आप एक बार देखिए on social media or any other place, it is abysmal. Especially the professional organizations of allopathic practitioners dishes out the worst of treatments as far as the Ayurvedic community is concerned. That itself is proof of the fact कि science को आपने पूरी तरह से West का बच्चा मान लिया है. You believe that science has emanated from the West and there is only one way of looking at even science. So the unfortunate reality is, on aspects of ethics, on aspects of human rights, on aspects of science, इन सारे क्रिटिकल मुद्दों पे आपने अपने ओरिजिनल थॉट को उनके चरणों पे समर्पित कर दिया है. एंड देयरफॉर यू आर टुडे अ पैसिव सिविलाइजेशन व्हिच इज merely surviving on the received wisdom of the West, when in fact you have such a rich tradition of argumentation, you have such a rich tradition of legal jurisprudence, you have such a rich tradition of knowledge systems. अगर आप ये बार बार कहे जाते हैं कि बख्तियार खिलजी ने हमारे इतने सारे पुस्तकालयों को जला दिया है, तो उनमें क्या थे अकॉर्डिंग टू यू? नॉलेज ही तो था. क्या आपके हिसाब से इतने सारे मंदिर या इतने सारे आपने जो आर्किटेक्चर यहाँ पे क्रिएट कर रखा है मुगलों के आने से पहले या फिर मुस्लिम्स के आने से पहले या इस्लाम की एंट्री के पहले, ये आर्किटेक्चर कहां से आया? श्योरली इट्स नॉट योर केस दैट लटियंस की आत्मा यहाँ पे घूम रही थी बिफोर ही वाज बॉर्न. ओके, सो the unfortunate reality is we have decided that the concept of scientific temper, not just science, scientific temper, rationality and reason, all these issues or all these values, Bharatiya Sanskriti ke pare hai. It's almost as if we have decided that it doesn't have any relationship with our civilization. So therefore, apart from culture and the law, I do believe that a decolonial approach is extremely important, even from the especially from the realm of science, simply because there are certain patterns of analysis, there are certain patterns of looking at certain things which are extremely unique to this particular civilization. A certain pattern of looking at a certain issue, a framework of looking at a particular subject, that is more important than the knowledge of the subject itself. आप किसी चीज को किस नजरिए से और किस फ्रेमवर्क से देखते हैं और किस अंदाज से देखते हैं is the first thing that matters more than what is the end result of that particular analysis. Because ultimately that decides the manner of the analysis, that decides the process, that also asks the basic question, is there anything cultural or unique about the manner in which you look at problems? I've given a very crude example in a previous context, which is to say, चाइना से एक इंजीनियर आता है, जापान से एक इंजीनियर आता है, भारत से एक इंजीनियर आता है, सारे के सारे इंजीनियर्स होते हैं. लेकिन आपका ये कहना थोड़ी हो सकता है कि एक प्रॉब्लम को अप्रोच करने का तरीका सबका एक ही होगा. बिकॉज देयर इज अ कल्चरल इम्पैक्ट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग. एवरी कल्चर has its own ways of analyzing a problem, diagnosing a problem, and addressing a certain problem or a challenge. That is where your cultural experience translates to individual experience. Because collective जो memory होता है वो individuals के पास वैसे ही आता है. Because what do you ask yourself? What did my ancestors do in a similar situation when faced with a similar problem? Do I have an example to look at it or not? That is what is taken forward as civilizational memory and cultural memory or collective memory. It is not limited simply to aspects of history. It is equally applicable to aspects of science. It is equally applicable to aspects of, let's say, even architecture for that matter. Okay? Collective memory जो चीज है उसको ये सोचना कि इसका सिर्फ एक काम है that it will occupy this role of an ornament or an आभूषण, which is to say it has no functional utility, is perhaps the most, let's say, misplaced way of looking at cultural memory. One of the most important things as a knowledge-based society that we have always been, or a knowledge-driven society that we've always been, is to understand what is our concept of knowledge and how did we approach knowledge, to the extent that a significant amount of our societal organization or social organization revolved around knowledge. As much as you believe that someone who imparts the Vedas as education is important, you equally believe that the Vishwakarma equally has a place in this particular society, who's responsible for building all the stunning architecture that we see around us. Okay? Because there's a traditional position called the Sthapati, which means the sculptor, who is the one who actually carves and chisels and sculpts the murtis that you see in temples. These people take extreme pride in their own knowledge of the Vedas, the Puranas, and the Itihasas, because जब भी ये sculpt करते हैं, वे पुराण और इतिहास को ही तो sculpt करते हैं मूर्तियों पे. On the walls of the temple, what you see is your history, not mythology, is your itihasa. That's what they effectively do. So that becomes a craft in itself. That becomes a profession in itself. It's not a job. It's a craft where it is followed by, I mean, it's effectively transmitted from the father to the son, and that's how it becomes a vocational profession or a generational profession, and then it becomes a community. So as a knowledge-driven society which has worshipped Jnana, it is extremely important for us to take back our own cultural agency with respect to how we perceive knowledge. Otherwise, this colonial consciousness will push us to a point where we actually think of Ayurveda at par with witchcraft. I've heard such horrendous statements being made on Twitter by doctors' associations, by allopathic medical practitioners, that I would pity anyone who opts for Ayurveda in this particular country, because apart from the fact that they are not treated as mainstream by even the clients, or let's say by the patients, so to speak, the medical fraternity itself thinks of them as second-class citizens. जिन लोगों को जाति प्रथा से प्रॉब्लम है, उनको इस जाति प्रथा से भी प्रॉब्लम होनी चाहिए. That you effectively have created a caste structure in such an important profession, despite the government taking steps to have recognized this particular medical practice as a mainstream practice. I'll give you a simple example. Corona shuru hua tha from the Chinese. The let's say the Chinese system also pushes the virus out and also comes out with Chinese traditional medicine to address the very same problem. मतलब प्रॉब्लम का इजाद भी वही करते हैं, उसका सॉल्यूशन भी वहीं से भेजते हैं, and they decide to use this very problem as a means to promote Chinese traditional medicine. During the entire lockdown, how many of us have followed any measures that have been taken by the central government to actively push Ayurvedic treatment mechanisms to address at least mild corona or moderate corona? We have not heard of that at all. Are you telling me that Ayurveda cannot even be trusted to address basic issues of immunity? Is that your position? There are, from what I hear, I mean, I've spoken to quite a few Ayurvedic practitioners because I was trying to help them with certain policy issues. They have close to 6,000 formulations to address a variety of fevers, a variety of imbalances, which is to say, virus kuch bhi ho, as long as I try and address the imbalance between kapha, pitta, and what are the vata, which is the three different forms of energy inside the human body. That is where the Ayurvedic analysis effectively starts. And they're telling, and in fact, whenever I used to discuss this issue with them, they'd say, it is really surprising. China, which is the mischief monger in this entire situation, gets away with actually pushing Chinese traditional medicine to the rest of the world. And we who actually are the recipients of such a brilliant system called the Ayurvedic system don't even want to give Ayurveda a single chance of proving itself in such a critical juncture. That is where it answers your question, how second-rate we think of ourselves and our own knowledge systems when it comes to even science. Talk to Ayurvedic practitioners, and you can actually write a book on the vyatha that they go through in this country because of being Ayurvedic practitioners. They are treated as second-grade practitioners. You should actually talk to them. In fact, whenever possible, please host a talk by Professor Rama Jayasundar next time. And she will tell you exactly how they're treated by the so-called scientific community in this country, because they literally function like a gymkhana or a mafia. So the very notion that you carry is the issue that I'm trying to address through my book. And I'm urging readers to read the references in my book and treat my book primarily as a catalog of those references that I've given with respect to the Bharatiya civilization. Because, pardon me for saying so, your question is historically incorrect. It's factually completely incorrect. To assume that we are a constantly invaded and defeated civilization does such grave factual injustice to the kind of resistance that we have put up, the kind of fight that we have given, and the way we reconquered several portions. I'm sorry, this question is historically baseless, and there is a good reason for this. Each time this discussion happens, the trap that you walk into is by looking at Bharat's experience as an isolated experience, as if we are the only country that has constantly faced invasions and we have had no response mechanisms. The problem with that assumption is twofold. One, look at the number of pre-Christian, pre-Islamic civilizations which have vanished in front of your eyes today, and which have been pushed to extinction over several centuries. Lithuania is perhaps the youngest Christian country, relatively speaking, and even they became Christian perhaps maybe not too far in time, maybe 300 or 400 years ago maximum. And compare that with Bharat, which has retained its non-Christian, non-Hindu character to a significant extent, and we continue to believe that we are invaded, that we are defeated, and that we were easily colonized. Do you really believe that the numbers that we have today in terms of population is because of any lack of effort or intent on the part of the Muslim invader or the Christian colonizer? Is that your understanding of history? Please look at the number of Hindu princely states that Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had to weave together and put together to create the Indian Union. Look at the number of Hindu princely states that ultimately the British man took the power from. So clearly, at least until the 18th century, I would say until the Battle of Panipat, and even significantly thereafter, that is after 1761, you had reconquered so many areas. Compare that with Africa, compare that with Latin America, compare that with North America, Australia, the rest of the world for that matter, or even for that matter, the rest of Europe. Europe is not a Christian, let's say, Christian civilization at the outset. It has become Christian civilization. Therefore, the very first defeated civilization, the very first conquered civilization, the very first converted civilization is the European civilization, which has completely lost its pre-Christian origins, its pre-Christian faith systems. Please take a look at what is happening in Lithuania, in Iceland, and so many other countries where they're trying to revive the faith systems which existed prior to Christianity in those parts of the world. They are struggling to do so. Even in Bharat, at the very least, you're close to 800 million, and the entire population of Hindus in the world is 1.1 billion. You're the third largest religion in the world. Take a look at what has happened with the Jews. Look at all these experiences, and you still think of yourself as a defeated society? I'm sorry, that's the problem with the history textbooks today, because it teaches you that you're a defeated society. After the first invasion, or let's say the first major incursion, which is the invasion of Sindh by the Arabs, I think in 711 CE, it took them close to 300 years to cross the Sindh. The frequent invasions and the regularity of invasions started in the, let's say, the late 10th century or the, let's say, early 11th century. And after that, obviously, as a civilization, you have taken some time to respond. But what do you make of the Rajputs? What do you make of the Marathas? What do you make of the Sikhs? Somehow we so selectively celebrate all of them and still continue to believe that we are a defeated civilization. Does nobody teach you how the Dutch Navy lost at the hands of Martanda Varma, the king of Travancore, in the 18th century, the first Asian, let's say, ruler to comprehensively defeat a European navy? Don't we read any of this? That's the problem. I'm sorry, I don't have a problem with you personally, but this question is reflective of the abysmal and disappointing lack of knowledge as far as Bharat's history is concerned. When you look at Bharat in isolation, you will assume that this is some kind of a walk-in and a walkover where everybody's had a walk in the park to simply enter this place. The kind of ruthless resistance that was given even to Alexander. Alexander, forget everybody else. Alexander was given among the toughest resistances that was ever known by the Brahmins and the ladies of that particular region, which you know as the Vahik Pradesh today, which is the Bactrian region. Read this. You have inherited a history and heritage of valor and huge resistance and successful resistance. Entire Spain was under Islamic rule for close to 800 years, after which they had to launch what is known as Reconquista. From the Bharatiya experience, Reconquista has been going on right from the beginning. Ask the Rajasthanis and they'll tell you the proud history of Bappa Rawal, who actually kicked these fellows all the way to Arabia once more. I think this was before the Bin Qasim's invasion of Raja Dahir in Sindh. This was before that. Please read history. Don't jump to these conclusions. What you're taught in your textbooks is rubbish. It's garbage, not even worth being recycled. Read the works of R.C. Majumdar. I keep repeating these names over and over again. Read the works of Jadunath Sarkar. Read the words of Harbila Sarda. Read the works of G.C. Pandey. Read the works of contemporary scholars like Meenakshi Jain, Dr. Meenakshi Jain, or Sitaram Goel, who's written on the Hindu resistance. You are not children of Gandhi, and you're certainly not children of some peace-loving hippie. You have taken forward, or you have inherited a huge tradition of Kshatra, regardless of what you think of your Varna. So please negate this nonsense from your head. Remove this rubbish from your head. You know nothing about history if this is your question. This is exactly why you need to read the book. To say that your notions of Bharat's history are so buried under what the white man wants us to understand and think of ourselves that we are a defeated society. What defeated society? Europe today is in shambles. It has no response to the challenge of the Middle East. Bharat has been dealing with this for several centuries now, and it has managed to contain what Europe is unable to contain. Sweden is effectively crumbling as a society as a consequence of illegal migration. Germany doesn't want to talk about the mass rapes that happen in that particular country as a consequence of migration. Paris doesn't want to talk about certain suburbs which are no-go zones for the police anymore. That's exactly what is happening in the so-called West, because they don't know how to handle this creature. We know how to handle this creature. We've been doing so for generations. Please press a delete button, Control Alt Delete, and a permanent delete of this nonsense from your head. Read proper books. I hope you do so, and I hope you never ask this question again, and you stop someone from asking this question again, and shame him for asking this question the next time. This question is not a problem which is personal, but this is a problem that is collective. You have no idea how frustrating and how disappointing it is to hear this question in the age of internet, where source after source, literature after literature is available for people to read, and still they don't read. Where are you getting these opinions from? What is your source? What are you exactly reading that tells you that you're a defeated society? If you're reading the Marxist school of nonsense, their entire goal has been to push you into slavery. Don't read literature written by, I'm sorry to say, Irfan Habib or Rovilar Thapar or R.S. Sharma. They are not worth reading at all under any circumstances. The only reason that you should read them is to understand how paid stooges have effectively brushed Bharat's history under the carpet to the detriment of the civilization. I dare use that language. These people did not have the guts or the courage of the conviction to actually prove their point in the Ram Janmabhoomi case when invited to actually present themselves as expert witnesses, when they kept peddling nonsense and propaganda as opposed to putting forth facts. So please don't read these books. They are not worth reading at all. At the very least, in the age of internet, nobody should have the excuse of saying, I was not aware of this. When you can Google for all sorts of rubbish, please Google on Indian history. Most of the literature is available on archive.org free of charge. The bulk of the literature, at least 30% of the references that I've referred to in my book, we downloaded it from archive.org. Please read them. When I say this equally of the history of the North and the South, because there is no such thing as the North and the South. Bharat has behaved as one. So I'm sorry for this rant. I'm sure this is going to go viral on YouTube. But this question has opened the floodgates, and that's precisely the rogue that I'm trying to cure through the book. Because generations of historians have been trying to cure this. And I hope to put forth that literature before people to say, कुछ बोलने से पहले पढ़ तो लो. Because you will pass on this very same nonsense to the next generation. Are you telling me that after having converted several continents, the only reason that you are alive today as Hindus is because of the benevolence of the Christian colonizer or the invader? How is that even possible? वो आपको क्यों बख्शेगा जब उसने पूरी दुनिया को बख्शा नहीं है? आप पे क्या कृपा दृष्टि है भाई उसकी, ये मुझे समझा दो. आपको क्यों छोड़ रखा है? Surely you're not related to him. You're not a chacha bhatija, no? So why are you being given this kind of a leeway? That is because you fought back spiritually, politically, culturally, militarily, intellectually. Introspect, where is this question coming from? Is it coming from a position of knowledge? Or is it coming from the darkness of ignorance? If you can honestly come back to, if you can honestly tell yourself, I did not know enough to arrive at this conclusion, I would say that's a fantastic beginning. Then start knowing enough. Start reading. जिस मुद्दे पे सवाल करने की इच्छा है या उस पे बात करने के लिए आप तैयार हैं, फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपल इज उसमें पढ़ना सीखिए और तैयारी करना सीखिए. उसके बाद आप अपने कंक्लूजन्स को प्रेजेंट कीजिए. I'm sorry, this is not meant to be rude to the person who has asked the question. The point is, this is reflective of the massive cancer in the society, especially the Hindu community, and particularly and solely the Hindu community, because I think this is the community that needs a surgical invasive strike. It needs truth bombs on a daily basis. कि तुमने कुछ नहीं पढ़ा है अपनी संस्कृति के बारे में, तो अपनी संस्कृति के बारे में बात करने से पहले मुंह बंद रखो. Others know your history better. Others know your language better. Your Sanskrit is being, let's say, hijacked and monopolized by Westerners with a very clear agenda. Ek din aayega, like Audrey Tushki, when you talk about Sanskrit and your religion, she will get up and her cohorts will get up and say, तुम्हें कुछ नहीं आता, मुंह बंद रखो. हम आपके धर्म के बारे में हम आपसे बेहतर जानते हैं. ये भी एक दिन आएगा, आ चुका है already. I would say our ancestors will regret for having spawned these kind of people, because what they fought for during years of colonization and years of invasions, we are giving it away in so-called independent Bharat. That is the sad reality. The resistance that was alive until 1947 has been snuffed out of the society by the irresponsible paid Nehruvian civilization 100%. Nehruvian civilization, according to me, is a separate civilization. जिनको भारत से कोई ना लगाव है ना जुड़ाव है. Their utter disgust and hatred, they have successfully passed it on through the education system and the language policies of this country. आप अपने आप को इस रोग से मुक्त कीजिए किसी भी हालत में. Start reading the literature, at least in your mother tongues, man. Your ancestors have written in Tamil, Telugu, in Assamese, Bengali, in so many languages. At the very least, read that literature. एक single sentence आप string नहीं कर पाते हैं अपनी मातृभाषा में, despite having the best of resources, and you think you actually have the standing to point fingers at your ancestors who have not just withstood but have successfully repelled the invader. And again, not to be personal, but कुछ तो शर्म करनी चाहिए हमें. They died and they fought to protect this civilizational space, to protect this Punya Bhumi, not as a territory, but as a Bhumi where our ancestors are worshipped and our gods are worshipped with sticks, with broomsticks, with vessels and utensils. The Brahmins fought Alexander, the so-called conqueror, who was stopped in his tracks in the one country that he could not defeat, which is Bharat. In which other country did his soldiers say, I don't want to go to this place because I don't think we can fight that army? That was their reaction. This is not entire Bharat's army. He is talking of one Janapad, which is Magad. One Janapad's army is capable of instilling diffidence in the so-called world-conquering force, which is Alexander's army, who had defeated Darius's Persia, who had finished all the way from Middle East, Babylon. He's coming here and he's stopped in his tracks here and you think you've inherited a legacy of defeatism. You may not respect yourself, but please respect your ancestors. They did a stupendous job of protecting this country. That's why we are able to come up with this nonsense.
I think it is our lack of zeal and understanding that we are not making effort to know enough about our culture and Sanskriti. Anyway, keeping my question very short so that others can also get time. One of the things which recently have bothered me a lot is the recent zeal of the judiciary to basically go and poke its nose everywhere, whether it belongs or not, that I can't comment on. But and what surprises me is that everybody nowadays think that this 75-year-old document called the Constitution of India has to trump everything, which includes our 5,000, 7,000, 8,000 year old civilization and its values and everything. And that was created by a set of people who were educated in the British system, all of them. Even though we are Ganatantra, but there was no public representation over there in that group of people who created it. And it's all the educated people, British educated people, who went ahead and wrote whatever they wanted to or whatever. But that whole idea that this can trump our civilizational values is very, very, sad as far as I'm concerned. What's your opinion about it, sir?
In the section on coloniality, which is the first section of the book, there is a very specific subsection where I address this disease, which is called Constitution, the New True Religion of Post-Colonized Societies or Decolonized Societies. So read that portion where I specifically say how judiciary in these countries has now become the new Protestant Reformation movement, where it is constantly asking people to sever its roots or their roots with their civilization in the name of constitutional morality. Okay? And how the use of constitutional morality as a doctrine has come to the severe detriment of Indic civilization and its space is something that I've clearly taken a position on, despite being a practitioner of constitutional law before the Supreme Court. I've taken this position very clearly. See, you have to remember that to assume that everything can be addressed legally or through the law is not possible. Sometimes it is for the society to stand up and express its opinion in a constitutional way, but make its position known to the powers that be, both in the executive and the legislature, or in fact, even in the judiciary, to say, please know what your limits are when it comes to interfering with us. As much as the Constitution gives you the power to set certain things in order, it also sets the red lines which are not supposed to cross. And the judiciary is equally expected to respect those red lines. And the judiciary cannot treat itself as a God-sent institution to reform the rest of the society. I dare say so. And I've said as much in the book. So it is for people to actually say this, because you see, एक तरफ contempt of court act है. Okay. आप ये नहीं बोल सकते हैं, वो नहीं बोल सकते हैं, ये नहीं कह सकते हैं, वो नहीं कह सकते हैं. We can't be held to account by the legislature. We can't be held to account by the judiciary, by the executive. And the only people that we will be held to account by is our own selves. So if that is your attitude, then perhaps at some stage, the public will need to respond to this through articles, through letters, through opinion pieces, and say, please preserve your respect. अपनी इज्जत अपने हाथ, तो आप प्लीज अपनी इज्जत को बचाइए by keeping yourself both transparent and accountable. That's the only way you earn the respect of the people. See, I've said this before, that if people lose faith in the legislature or the executive, that is still okay, because they hope that the one organization or the one institution that will conduct itself better is the judiciary. So the worst situation for a democracy is not when people lose faith in the executive or the legislature, but when they lose both faith in and respect for the judiciary. And I think it's time for the judiciary to seriously introspect this. The colonial lens that they wear when it comes to Indic civilizational aspects needs to be discarded in the dustbin. They need to stop doing this. And I say so with a lot of respect, knowing fully well that the institution is not a monolith, because there are multiple opinions. Because as many people populate an institution, there are as many opinions. So there is diversity of thought. Unfortunately, only those positions which are anti-civilization or which are at loggerheads with the civilization constantly get traction in the media. So therefore, the media must be equally held responsible for airing only those views as opposed to those views which are closest to and consistent with Indic civilization ethos. So that reality also exists. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had a dissenting judgment in the Sabarimala case for that matter, right? Otherwise, you would have had a unanimous judgment. So the point, or you wouldn't have had a successful judgment in the Sri Padmanabha Swami temple case. Okay? So there are certain positives also. No institution is a monolith. There is a diversity of opinions. But the public must start talking about it. See, this is a common thread that is going to run, and perhaps it's going to preempt a lot of questions that are going to come my way, which is हर चीज का निवारण लीगल प्रोसेस से नहीं होता है. The society needs to understand that it needs to constantly be vocal about its space. Otherwise, both the state as well as other arms of the state will constantly encroach upon the space of the society. That is the nature of these institutions. They would want to arrogate as much power to themselves as possible so that from top to bottom will be written in the name of constitutional morality to further constitutional morality and to protect constitutional morality. So, bacha kya civilization ki agency ka? What happens to the civilization's free will? What happens to the organic growth of a society? Will the judiciary determine the course of history? How is that even possible? Is that the purpose of the judiciary as envisaged by the framers of the constitution? Is that consistent with constitutional morality? These are hard questions. It's important that these uncomfortable questions are asked, but it must come from the society as well. At some stage, the use of the Contempt of Courts Act to stifle any form of legitimate criticism of the judiciary as an institution must be stopped. That discussion must start, and I think we are at the right stage for this, given what's happening in certain cases. So, this is, I would basically say, the public needs to respect the law, but not fear any institution. No state's institution is meant to be feared. People must abide by the law and respect the constitution, but they should not be in fear of any institution, because at the end of the day, we are part of the society. We have every right to criticize every institution which is clearly crossing its red lines. Lakshman Rekha sirf society, legislature or executive ke liye nahi hai, sabhi ke liye hai. That is exactly what is known as separation of powers. That is called the doctrine of separation of powers. कि आप अपने दायरे को समझिए और आप अपनी हदों में रहिए, ये सभी पे लागू होता है. Next question.
I have this quotation from V.S. Naipaul in his book India: Wounded Civilization. So
Right.
V.S. Naipaul, as you know, is no negationist. He also understands what we went through in history and all that. But his his resolution is completely different from perhaps what you're saying. So I'm quoting now directly from V.S. Naipaul, and he says, "In conquered India, Renaissance has always been taken to mean a recovery of what has been suppressed or dishonored, in an exalting of old ways. Periods of respite, men have never taken the opportunity, or perhaps have been without the intellectual means to move ahead.
Right.
And disasters come again. Art historians tell us." Naipaul concludes that these are only aspects of a larger crisis, which is that of a decaying civilization, where the only hope lies in further swift decay.
Right. Okay.
So,
shall I respond?
Yes.
Okay. Please read the scholarship on Naipaul's scholarship after Naipaul, where the analysis is, or the diagnosis is, that notwithstanding his recognition of the wounded nature of the civilization, to a significant extent, Naipaul's opinions are also influenced, or were also influenced by Orientalism, wherein he had effectively assumed, and to tie it back to two questions before, that there is a fundamental problem in the civilization, which is why it is constantly wounded and defeated. Okay? As opposed to asking or coming out with a conceptual framework as to what is the problem, how did we arrive here, what is the institutional mechanism that was put in place by the Christian colonizer to put forth his point of view or to impose his worldview on this particular society. As opposed to asking that scholarly question, Naipaul's strength as well as his perhaps weakness is the recognition of a problem, which is to say that there is a wounded character of the civilization, but what and how is something that is not addressed by him enough. That is my reading of his scholarship, as well as that is what other scholars have also said. I am not a scholar. I'm saying this is what scholars have said. I've had an opportunity to read some of his books, and I do believe that one of the things that he believes as the weakness of the civilization, according to him, is its inability and reluctance to engage with the rest of the world and to actively deal with it. Now, the funny part is, Naipaul was significantly dealing with a Nehruvian India. And therefore, at a time when the government certainly did not believe in a free market economy, and therefore empowering the individual or innovation or the latent entrepreneurial spirit of this particular country, Naipaul was actually dealing with three waves of colonization: Islamic colonization, Christian colonization, and Nehruvian colonization of this country's consciousness. So therefore, would Naipaul have held the same views about Bharat had he visited Bharat and had experienced the explosion of the entrepreneurial spirit of Bharat post the liberalization of 1991 is a question that you need to ask. Second, would he have had this opinion of Bharat in the 2000s? Would he have had this opinion of Bharat in the 2020s? That's a legitimate question, because he was dealing with a society which was being bound by its own government in an independent country from expressing its free market potential. Nehruvian economics, if at all it can be called economics, was seen as representative of what was called as the Hindu rate of growth pejoratively. That was historically incorrect, economically incorrect, and factually incorrect. An artificially imposed fetter on a society's ability to innovate and transact and engage with the world is effectively diagnosed as a fundamental problem with the society itself. Look at the problem with the analysis. So his analysis that obviously we have been wounded by Islamic invasions and Christian colonization, to that extent is right. But to assume that that is the reason that we did not develop, or that we were limited to villages, or that we couldn't urbanize, is to actually fail to understand the impact of Nehruvian mindset on Bharat. As opposed to Nehru, if, let's say, independent Bharat had paid heed to Rajagopalachari's advice, where he said, please don't go the way of Russia. Let's not look at the Soviet model of centralized planning. Let's look at the free market economics of the West, because that is the way of the future. And we need wealth creation to lift this country out of the ocean of poverty that it is actually, it found itself in at 1947. And that is the condition that was created by the British man. If Rajagopalachari's advice had been paid heed to, or Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had been the prime minister, would Naipaul have found himself with this analysis in the 80s and the 90s? I don't think so. So Naipaul's analysis must be attributed to the artificial conditions and fetters imposed on the civilization by Nehru and Nehruvian dispensations after Nehru, not to anything else. I can't understand the simple. I mean, see, here's the important aspect. It's the same civilization which suddenly spikes, and let's say whose rate of growth improves after 1991, the moment the economy is realized. So what has changed in 1990 and 1991 that the civilization suddenly responds to the West better, that it is able to negotiate with the West in WTO, GATT, and other places? Surely, ek saal mein to kuch nahi badla na. That means you were repressed and you were not being allowed to prove your caliber on the international stage. That is where I believe that there are portions of Naipaul's analysis which must be certainly accepted, but there are certain portions which do not take into account the fetters imposed on this on the potential of the civilization by the Nehruvian mindset. Next question.
So you have mentioned that in your book that our minds are still remain colonized, and obviously this can be evidence from the fact that we are still following a British era constitution. Maybe we should move to a more dharmic or dharma-based constitution.
I have not said that in the book.
No, I'm saying maybe then the alternative could be that we could move to a more dharma-based constitution.
No, I have not said in the book that we're using a British-made constitution.
No, I mean British era, or the laws that have been forwarded from the British when they were ruling us.
I have not analyzed the current constitution, but okay, please go on.
Would you like to be kind of our modern day B.R. Ambedkar in his capacity as the drafting committee chairman to kind of come up with something which will be more suitable to our society, our dharmic values. I'm saying this because it's easy to navigate from our current constitution to what we want it to look like if we have sufficient political will and society backing us.
One, I don't want to be a modern Ambedkar or a current day Ambedkar. That is a role that I certainly do not want to take up. I have my own reasons for it. I respect the gentleman for his contributions, but I don't want to be an Ambedkar. Second, there will be certain policy-based prescriptions on the way forward on the Constitution in the second book and the third book. That's exactly what I have said in the conclusion to the book of the first book. That here I analyze until 1919, 1920, the actual framing of the current constitution between 1920 and 1951, rather 50 and 51, shall be discussed in the second book, where after the analysis, I will present whatever tentative solutions and suggestions I have on whether this constitution is capable of protecting our interests, or what are the changes, tweaks, or interpretations, or complete overhauls and revamps it may need. That is a discussion that I will have after the second book, not before that. The reason why I'm not in a position to offer that yet is because my analysis is work in progress on this particular period. Okay. So I don't want to jump the gun and place the cart before the horse until that analysis is complete, because I certainly don't believe in creating a predetermined outcome and pushing the argument in that particular direction. I want to keep an open mind during the process of writing the second book, because that is the most important book in this trilogy. The first book is merely setting the conceptual tone for the trilogy. And I've compared this crudely with Bahubali 1, where I'm actually introducing the characters. How these characters play out and how it has impacted the framing of the Constitution will be analyzed and discussed in the second book, post which I'll come out with whatever I think are my limited prescriptions, assuming I have the brains and the bandwidth for it. But I'll certainly endeavor to do so by drawing significantly from dharmic principles. So I'm having to read dharmic notions of the state, dharmic notions of rights and duties, and also compare and contrast it with, let's say, the exercise undertaken during the framing of the Constitution. So effectively, this entire promotion drama which is going on currently of the current book will end in a week or so, maximum in 2 weeks. I'll put an end to it after that. By 7th of October, it'll be done and dusted. After that, I will not promote this book any further, because I have to start seriously the second book. That is the most important activity apart from my own practice and stuff. So after the 7th of October, I'll jump headlong into this particular activity. So to give a short answer to your very important question, give it time. I'll certainly respond to it in the second book. Okay?
I have a lot of questions, but I won't ask you. I'll ask you just one.
Yes.
You spoke about Ayurveda. And I'm not going to the past. I'm a researcher and I've read all the books that you have recommended. And
okay.
I live in Australia. So 2 years or 3 years back, we started seeing advertisements about Western herbal medicine.
Okay.
And first thing was we started laughing, and even on the Facebook advertisements, you will see comments where people laugh. Western herbal medicine, how can you say that? We know Chinese, we know African, we know Indian, we know Ayurveda. Western medicine is something that is, where are you getting it from? That point in time, I did not realize the long-term implications of this. Over a period of time, then COVID-19 happened, and we all saw the reactions to Ayurvedic medicines, Ananda Yagaru, everybody else. And then while doing my research, I also came across Invest India website, where it was written that there is 100% FDI in Ayurveda. Government has approved that. So I was shocked, saying that on the one hand, we are not allowed to practice what is ours. And on the other hand, you're allowing for the foreigners to come and have 100% FDI in Ayurveda. And the other shocking thing was that 100% FDI in all three different categories of businesses, either by automatic route or by direct route. This was really revealing and shocking. And then when you come across the policies that are being made these days, I'm not sure how many are going into the policy in-depth understanding of those. They all seem to be what you mentioned, Western universal models with Eurocentric gaze, with Eurocentric investments. in this regard, if development is expedited 4 times the speed of what happened in the last few decades, in the next, where are we heading and how do we mitigate the risks is my question to you.
Thank you. You just made my point, because this is exactly what I've been trying to tell people, that you're limiting the scope of your cultural angst to politics as opposed to looking at policy. Okay? Which is to say, you're so caught up in politics that you're not asking yourself what has it translated to with respect to policy. Whether the very same Eurocentrism and Western normativism is being pushed even by an ostensibly non-left government. Okay. And any time and every time somebody asks this question, notwithstanding the fact that you vote for this government, or you otherwise back for this government, or you support this government on critical issues, your allegiance is still questioned. Your loyalty is questioned. Unfortunately, these questions don't seem to come actually from the establishment itself. These questions come from, let's say, the trolls that swarm social media, okay, who don't understand policy. The worst part about, let's say, the situation is people in power are open to these questions. They're open to criticism. They're open to being told that you are actually getting it wrong on certain aspects. But the ones who are loyal to the master than the master himself don't want you to ask these questions, because these questions are extremely uncomfortable questions. And that's exactly where civilizational interests and, dare I say, epistemological interests, knowledge-based interests, are being surrendered at the altar of and at the feet of politics. You're talking of, let's say, Ayurveda and science. I ask the very same question with respect to the law, which is to say, what concrete steps have we taken to indigenize legal education in this country? Because legal reforms don't start from legal policies at the top, they start with legal education. These are legitimate questions. Now you try telling these so-called, let's say, people who keep shouting on social media, "Arey bhai, you will escalate or air or ventilate an expectation only if you believe that somebody has the intent or has the will or is capable of doing it." Now, when you ask me to shut up, are you telling me that don't have such expectations? I believe that this is the best government to actually put forth your point of view on these aspects, because I couldn't have aired these expectations to the previous government. But interestingly, the Ayush Ministry was created by the previous government. That is a reality that people may not want to talk about. Okay. Because they are so stuck in government versus government, as opposed to asking what happens to our right to speak about indigenous science at the global table of science, or on knowledge in general. If I had said this point at the outset, I'd have been accused of a shifting allegiance. Okay. Or I'd have been accused of taking a position against someone. When the fact of the matter is, I know for a fact that's not what, let's say, that someone would also think. Simply because if you don't take the criticism of well-meaning constituents, then who will you listen to? Right? We believe that as long as you are in power, there are quite a few things that can be achieved for the civilization. So therefore, we have every legitimate right and, let's say, dare I say, a civilizational obligation to push this as much as possible. So I'm grateful for the question, because otherwise, had it not been for this question, I'm sure I'd have actually been flooded with hate mail for raising these points. I'd have all sorts of comments flooding me on Twitter saying, "Oh, look at him, he's going to vote for the other side the next time. Oh, he's saying don't vote for this party this time. अरे ये नहीं होंगे तो तुम कहाँ जाओगे? अरे वे कौन कह रहा है ये सब? Who is saying all of this? Why are you inventing strawman arguments? एक legitimate सवाल पूछा जा रहा है, उसका जवाब दीजिए. और भारत, देखिए, so let me take a step further. हिंदुत्व क्या सिर्फ पॉलिटिक्स में है? साइंस में नहीं है क्या? नॉलेज में नहीं है क्या? एजुकेशन में नहीं है क्या? भाषा नीति में नहीं है? तो हिंदुत्व का अगर रेलेवेंस जो है हर स्पेसिफिक इश्यू में है, और लेट्स से हर एरिया में है, तो अब सिर्फ इसको पॉलिटिकल एरिना में क्यों देख रहे हैं? हिंदुत्व, अकॉर्डिंग टू मी, has legitimacy and application in every realm of civilizational interest. It can't get clearer than that. You are the one who's effectively saying that Hindutva must be limited to municipal elections, assembly elections, and parliamentary elections. इससे ज़्यादा आपका दिमाग जाता नहीं है और इसके बारे में सोचना नहीं चाहते. What are we supposed to do? See, here's the interesting part. Every time the left says, the non-left in this country, the right in this country, उनके पास ना दिमाग है, ना intellectual काबिलियत है, उनको जवाब देने का मन नहीं करता है क्या आपको? These are the people who are casteists who are effectively saying that only the left is the repository of knowledge and brains. इनको जवाब देना चाहिए, मुंह तोड़ जवाब देना चाहिए कि आप जो पढ़ा रहे हैं लोगों को और बच्चों को जो पढ़ा रहे हैं, it's not science, it's quackery. And what you're teaching students in the name of history is propaganda. You're the fascist Marxists of the first order. ये जवाब देना जरूरी है. So, obviously, to answer the question, I endorse the question completely. I also endorse the underlying sentiment behind the question. And I'm grateful for the question. As much as I had a problem with, let's say, 3 questions before, not with the person who was asking the question, but the incurability of the particular disease, this is the issue. Again, I repeat, before I'm swarmed by trolls on social media, अरे भाई मैं कांग्रेस के लिए वोट नहीं करूंगा, चिंता मत करो. ये उस चीज के बारे में नहीं है. हर चीज वोटिंग पे जाके नहीं रुकती है. उससे थोड़ा आगे सोचने की कोशिश करो. 2, I'm equally aware that we are able to have these discussions only because of the dispensation from 2014. ये भी सच है. I don't need to be told this. Obviously, so many initiatives have become possible because of this. There is no doubting it at all. आपसे कोई ये श्रेय छीनने की कोशिश नहीं कर रहा है, तो चिंता मत करो. Don't lose sleep over this. चिल करो. But उससे आगे भी आप देखना सीखो. These are legitimate questions. That tomorrow indigenous sciences पे और indigenous industry पे फिर से अंग्रेजों का कब्जा नहीं होना चाहिए. Multinationals का कब्जा नहीं होना चाहिए. ये हमारे हैं. ये हिंदुत्व की तो बात है. How is this any different? Thank you. Next. Yeah.
I am also from Melbourne and very looking forward to getting your book here soon to read about it. So we'll have more
Thank you, sir.
questions later. I had actually made a presentation in Sangam Talks around 6 months ago on India-China trade relations.
Okay,
and
sir.
we had done a 6 months research. This was especially during the border war, right? And everybody was talking about it. What we found was in the last 25 years, the policies that were being passed for Indo-China relations have really not changed. So when we raised this with BJP, elected officials, RSS, everybody, they said, "Hame nahi pata yaar, bureaucrats kar rahe hain, hum follow kar rahe hain." Now recently, the temple demolitions that happened in Karnataka, I'm basically from Bangalore, so we did not sleep for 2 days. So when we went and asked again the elected officials and we messaged them, bombarded them, saying what is happening, we were told that court order hai, hum kya kar sakte hain. So we were forced to go see the court order, the suo motu that was filed, the order that was given after that, and it quite clearly said that after 2009, if there are any legal structures, you can demolish them. Older ones you have to be given options. So when we went back and said, now suddenly BJP MP has filed in Mysuru and got stopped. The helplessness that we are seeing is, irrespective of the elected government, the bureaucrats seem to be running the country. And that was a conclusion we came last time, whether it's economic, it's religious, if there anything that's happening. So I'm not even making it political. And these bureaucrats seem to be driven by the same epistemological issues that you called out multiple times in your speaking. And people have asked me when I made a presentation in Sangam Talks also saying, okay, you've identified the problem, what next? So I said, I'm finding it difficult to even share the research we're doing with the right people. And I don't even know whether our own elected officials are ready to hear this. And I certainly don't think the bureaucrats, there's any way to re-educate them or share the results of our research and saying, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? All evidence-based hard fact research. None of the things that we presented was anything opinion-based at all, right? When people said China investment is zero, we actually showed them that there is $36 billion worth of Chinese investment in India, right? Whether it's in Ayurveda, temple, infrastructure, we studied everything. And same thing now is happening. They're trying to make a tourism product out of temples as well. So I think what we are not able to figure out is we can't control the court because the court orders are getting misinterpreted. We can't vote for the right government because both the governments seem to be doing the same thing in the last 25 years. We don't have a way to communicate to the bureaucrats because they don't want to listen to us. And I'm sure we are appreciating the Zoom call we are doing right now and talking to each other. What I'm not finding is in the democratic process that we have created, how do we actually drive change? apart from attending 11 p.m. night call, I'm not sleeping, figuring out how to solve the problem, and I don't know how to solve the problem. So I think we need more heads together. But I think that's a frustration. I was hoping that once your book comes, we can read a little bit more. But if you have any thoughts on it, it would be lovely to hear that as well.
Sir, one of the things I think this question and the question posed by your compatriot, another Australian Hindu, is how do I say this? I mean, you have said what quite a few people here have been saying for some time now, that policy seems to be in the hands of the same Congress establishment bureaucrat. Okay. And therefore, change in power has not translated to change in policy on certain aspects. Again, let me caveat this before, again, this is misinterpreted, because again, social media will pick this one line out and keep circulating it over and over and over again. Say, hey, here he comes, he is the Congress agent, he is the mole, he is the Trojan, shuru ho jayega. So and paid Chinese agent, all of this will start. Arey bhai, I'm anti-China, let me be clear. Okay, so that's one. Second, I'm making the point very, very clearly that there are quite a few achievements of this government. I won't deny them. Article 370, CAA, everything, yes, accepted. I will always say this is the only government that could have done this. That's exactly why this was voted to power. No denying it at all. Okay. But long-term, procedural, process-based, systemic changes, bureaucratic changes, policy-based changes are also called for on certain critical issues. I didn't speak much about Ayurveda because my exposure is limited. But the lady before you proved my point through policy. I'm not an economics guy, so I have to keep my mouth shut on this. But you have just made your point on Chinese investment in this country. Okay. Now, I would seriously want at least the listeners of this particular video and the watchers to please take note of this. There is no better dispensation than this dispensation under which this change can be effected. That is the expectation. This is the only government that has the will and that has the political mandate to undertake these sweeping changes. They are important. These invasive surgeries are important, and these can't be bloodless surgeries. Someone has to bleed because these are entrenched viruses and cancers in the system. Again, I have dealt with quite a few bureaucrats. I will not brand all bureaucrats as being anti-India. I'm not going to make that statement. Quite a few people, the honest ones, constantly get churned. They constantly get stuck between, let's say, the rock and the hard place. I'll say all of that. But this is not about individuals. This is about the system itself. So the only hope that I have is repeated attacks. I can't think of any other solution at this stage because practically I'm beat. Be it education, be it, let's say, or legal education, legal reforms, or let's say scientific reforms, education reforms. And when I say education reforms, I'm not limiting myself only to history textbooks. We have to go beyond that. Investment-based reforms, protecting. See, I'm someone who consciously believes that this Atmanirbharta is a fantastic initiative. I just hope that the policies which are crafted by the mandarins sitting in, let's say, bureaucratic establishments are not constantly trying to undermine Atmanirbharta as a project. Okay. Because every project which is capable of having a pro-India effect, a pro-Bharat effect in the long run and secure our national interest should not be compromised because of some unelected bureaucrat. Who on earth is the bureaucrat to constantly come in the way of important policies? Who is funding such bureaucrats? What is this money trail? Where is this coming from? Who are these paid interests at the end of the day who are standing in the way of national interest? This is the only government with the political mandate and the will that can address it. So I hope more enlightened people like you keep airing this expectation, because I genuinely believe that this dispensation still has its ears to the ground. It still pays attention to what people are saying, to what well-wishers are saying. Okay. I certainly projected and I certainly stood up as a well-wisher before the 2019 elections when I was asked to speak at a certain places. So I still continue to be a well-wisher of this dispensation, and I don't need to beat around the bush. I don't care for the labels that come from any other side. But All of this needs to translate to concrete policy-based initiatives, because it is policy that ensures continuity regardless of change in government. You need to at least put those Easter eggs in the system so that they can ripen or let's say work at the right moment. I don't know, sir. I honestly don't know. Maybe I don't have the brains to offer any further solution. The only thing that I've been trying to actually do is to talk and move certain, or let's say set a couple of balls in motion. But beyond that, I think you need to have a discussion of such nature with someone better. But from what you tell me, I've already had that discussion and still nothing has come out of it. So I don't know. Maybe I leave it to Lord Ram. Jai Shri Ram is all I can say. Next.
Sai Deepak, I met you in 2017 in one of your talks on immigration. Ever since then, I have been following you.
Oh,
and your
thank you.
cause, more important than that, the cause for which we all stand behind. And I have also been trying to contribute to it in a different area in the field of arts, in literature, and in an institutionalized way, as part of a project, as part of a research, a formal research, in which I believe that when we're reading post-colonial literature, some of the most celebrated writers, from Salman Rushdie to many others, though they are being considered as voice of the post-colonial world, of the colonized world, but to my eye, I believe that they are representing the colonial thought itself in some way or the other. And this is what I want to show. And it's been very difficult, because if I pick up some 20 scholars and thinkers on post-colonialism, within those 20, 18 again would seem to be saying something which directly or indirectly project the same colonial view, that India is a country of contradictions, failed democracy, historical no nation before,
no sense of history, constantly invaded, constantly colonized, stuck in caste, dowry, sati. Go on.
And in the name of nationalism, they are repressing the voice of their subaltern, their women, their
religious minorities,
etc. And two thinkers here, like Partha Chatterjee and these Ranjit Guha, what they say is that that Indian nationalism is a copy of Western nationalism. I want you to throw your ideas on that. First, answer those questions, answer those things. First, Indian nationalism is a copy of Western nationalism. They are just copying the same document through which they were colonized and repressed. And second is, Indian nationalism is antithetical, or it represses the voices of the marginalized communities. So we must abandon this project of nationalism and so on. And third is, it is irrelevant in a globalized world where borders don't matter. And in the name of diaspora and all those things, they are blurring that, they are reducing the intensity of anti-colonial struggle, which should continue even today. So these are some of the things I'm really finding it very hard to work upon that, because as I said, of the 20 thinkers, 18 thinkers, they would fall in that category. I've risked my life on that, on this project. And so please throw some ideas on you. And lastly, please also let us know how can I connect with you, or if it is possible. I've really tried to connect with you over the last 3-4 years, many a time, since that immigration talk on Rohingyas in 2017 November.
That was held by Sangam Talks in its previous avatar only.
Yes.
So, sir, आपने मेरी किताब पढ़ी है?
Sir, I was waiting कि मैं आपसे एक signed copy लूँगा. मतलब या तो
मैं सवाल इसलिए कर रहा हूँ, मैं यहाँ पे किताब की बिक्री करने की कोशिश नहीं कर रहा हूँ. ये सवाल मैंने इसलिए पूछा. This exact issue of the problem with post-coloniality I have addressed in the book. Okay? जो मुद्दा आपने उठाया है, you will see this in section 1, where I speak of the problems with post-colonial school and its active role in pushing coloniality into Bharat society. Okay? This is the exact issue. और जिन महान भावों का नाम आपने अभी निकाला था ना, क्या नाम है? पार्था चैटर्जी. इनके काम को भी मैंने थोड़ा बहुत वहां पे एड्रेस कर रखा है कि ये लोग कर क्या रहे हैं भारत में. ये पोस्ट कॉलोनियलिटी के नाम पे कॉलोनियलिटी को भारत के आत्मा के अंदर घुसा के जा रहे हैं. और I've said this very clearly. Okay? In fact, there are brilliant scholars on the subject who have called out Partha Chatterjee on the same issue, who basically saying, आप समझ रहे हैं कि आप you are basically giving the impression that you're challenging the colonizer and his worldview, but you're actually using the very same template to look at us. Okay? which is precisely why जब मैं decoloniality को option देता हूं as an alternative to post coloniality, unfortunately नॉन लेफ्ट के थोड़े बुद्धिजीवी ऐसे बैठे हैं जिनको ना पोस्ट कॉलोनियलिटी समझ में आता है, ना पोस्ट मॉडर्निज्म समझ में आता है, ना डीकॉलोनियलिटी समझ में आता है. आप इस सब्जेक्ट में पढ़े हैं तो मैं आपको बताता हूं. क्या आप ये कहेंगे कि पोस्ट कॉलोनियलिटी और डीकॉलोनियलिटी एक ही स्कूल से आते हैं? विल यू से दैट? इज इट पॉसिबल टू मेक दैट स्टेटमेंट? 100% no. Because decoloniality takes a serious position against coloniality, calls out its origins and clearly says तुम अपना टेम्पलेट हम पे थोपना बंद करो. Okay. Now, which is exactly why the entrenchment of post-colonial school in India's history departments, academic departments, education departments, policy departments, इसको तोड़ना जरूरी है. और जब ये बात निकल के आती है, लोगों को ये लगता है ये डीकॉलोनियलिटी के नाम पे मॉरल रिलेटिविज्म को जस्टिफाई कर रहा है ताकि फिर से अनटचेबिलिटी को जस्टिफाई कर दे, ब्राह्मणवाद को जस्टिफाई कर दे, सत्य को जस्टिफाई कर दे, डाउरी को जस्टिफाई कर दे. अरे कल्चरल एजेंसी के नाम, कल्चरल एजेंसी नाम की कुछ चीज होती है, पहले वो समझो बात को. एंड हम ये नहीं कह रहे हैं कि यूनिवर्सलिज्म हो नहीं सकता है, लेकिन यूनिवर्सलिज्म कोई एक आदमी या कोई एक समुदाय बैठ के पूरी दुनिया के लिए डिसाइड नहीं कर सकती है. यूरोप डिसाइड नहीं करेगी कि हमारे लिए वैश्विक मापदंड क्या होंगे या पूरे विश्व के लिए क्या होगा. ये हम सब बैठ के डिसाइड करेंगे. हमारा तो एटलीस्ट एक वॉइस तो होना चाहिए इस इशू में. ना आपका कोई से है, आपका ना कोई वीटो है, ना वोट है. ओके, सो देयरफॉर जो बात आपने कही है सर, उसको मैंने बुक में टू द बेस्ट ऑफ माय एबिलिटी डील कर रखा है, citing expert literature, not because this is my original thought. लैटिन अमेरिकन स्कॉलर्स ये बात कह चुके हैं, डॉक्टर बालगंगाधर ये बात कह चुके हैं, जेकब डी रूवर ये कह चुके हैं, उनके जितने भी यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ गेंट के जितने भी स्टूडेंट्स हैं वो ये ऑलरेडी कह चुके हैं that post-colonialism is an active and perhaps a paid ambassador of coloniality. So वो बात है. Okay, that's there. Now आपका दूसरा सवाल क्या था?
सर मेरा यही क्वेश्चन था. एक तो वो कि इन दैट आपने थोड़ा उसका आंसर कर दिया कि इट इज रिप्रेसिंग द वॉइसेस ऑफ द सबाल्टर्न, जैसे कि गायत्री स्पिवाक बोलकर गई हैं कि फेमिनिस्ट.
एग्जैक्टली. सो गायत्री चैटर्जी स्पिवाक, होमी भाभा, इन सब के काम को मैंने उसमें एड्रेस कर रखा है, ये कहते हुए कि सबाल्टर्न का जो कॉन्सेप्ट आज भारत में आया है, दैट इज अ प्रोडक्ट ऑफ लेट्स से पोस्ट कॉलोनियलिज्म. और जो भारत के अंदर के सोसाइटी के अंदर आप एक सबाल्टर्न का एक फॉल्ट लाइन क्रिएट करते हैं, और ये सबाल्टर्न्स आपके हिसाब से कौन होते हैं? सवर्ण आपके लिए सबाल्टर्न्स नहीं होते, अवर्ण आपके लिए सबाल्टर्न्स होते हैं, दलित, पिछड़े लोग, एंड यू कॉल ऑल दीस पीपल लेट्स से सबाल्टर्न्स. और जो डिवीजन कॉलोनाइजर ने यहाँ पे क्रिएट किया था, आप सबाल्टर्निज्म के नाम पे उसको और यहाँ पे आगे कर रहे हैं और उसको और डीप किए जा रहे हैं. That's exactly why I have said this. On Twitter भी मैंने कहा है, इस बुक में भी कहा है, subalternism is the toxic product of post-colonialism. Okay? It comes from the same poisonous school of post-colonialism. और ट्राइबल स्टडीज में इस post-colonialism का कितना दुष्प्रभाव हुआ है, I've said that. Which is to say, ट्राइबल नाम की एक कैटेगरी को वेस्टर्नर ने यहां पे इजाद किया था, और आप उसी को यूज करके आदिवासी, मूल निवासी, यही आप बोले जा रहे हैं. तो आपने अगर इनको मूल निवासी और आदिवासी कह दिया, तो आपके हिसाब से बाकी के लोग क्या कॉलोनाइजर्स हैं? तो आप बाकी हिंदुओं को आप कह रहे हैं कि आप कॉलोनाइजर्स हैं. तो यूरोपियन लेट्स से लेगेसी की जो विरासत है, आप हिंदुओं पे थोप के जा रहे हैं. यहाँ पे यू आर इफेक्टिवली ट्रीटिंग द रेस्ट ऑफ द हिंदूज ऑफ दिस कंट्री as the colonial, let's say, descendants who have inherited the colonization or the colonizing legacy of the European. That's something that I've said specifically, citing international conventions also, that how terrible our position has been with respect to tribes, that we constantly recognize this category without going back to our own indigenous treatment of the tribal communities. जिसकी वजह से अगर आप जाके उनसे बात करते हैं, आपको बोला जाता है कि आप सैफ्रनाइज कर रहे हैं, लेकिन जब आप क्रिश्चियन मिशनरीज को वहां पे खुला छोड़ देते हैं, तो आपसे कह रहे हैं कि आप सेक्युलरिज्म का पालन कर रहे हैं, आप लिबरलिज्म का पालन कर रहे हैं. ये कैसा मापदंड है भाई? ये व्हाट काइंड ऑफ ड्यूअल स्टैंडर्ड्स आर दीस?
So one thing which I have noticed is कि in the name of subaltern.
एक मिनट. The thing is, there are others who have to ask their questions. So I'm trying to systematically address your questions. No problem. So I think, in principle, the very issue that you have raised, I have addressed specifically in section 1 of the book, where I have addressed the problems with post-coloniality. I have addressed why decoloniality is better. I've also said that on page number 103, again I repeat, क्योंकि कुछ बुद्धिजीवी ऐसे बैठे हैं जिनको समझ में नहीं आता कि एक बुक को कैसे पढ़ा जाता है, 3 बार पढ़ते हैं उसके बाद भी उनके दिमाग में घुसता नहीं है, तो मैं बोल देता हूं that यूनिवर्सल स्टैंडर्ड्स के खिलाफ हम नहीं है, लेकिन यूनिवर्सल स्टैंडर्ड्स कोई एक कम्युनिटी बैठ के डिसाइड नहीं करेगी बाकी लोगों के लिए, और हमें भी वी नीड एन ऑप्शन एंड वी नीड अ वॉइस. एंड अगर हमसे कोई कहता है दैट मान लो उनके यूनिवर्सल स्टैंडर्ड्स को और अपने कल्चर को उसके हिसाब से बदलने की कोशिश करो, तो आपने मेरे पॉइंट को प्रूव कर दिया दैट यू आर अ colonialized person and you're a mental slave. You have just proved my point. Okay, so therefore आप अपने हिस्ट्री को उनके हिसाब से बदलने की कोशिश मत कीजिए. आपके हिस्ट्री में गुड भी है, बैड भी है, अगली भी है, किसी से भागने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. टू दी एक्सटेंट मैंने ये भी बोल रखा है द डीकोलोनियलिटी डज नॉट मीन आप बैठ के पूरे पास्ट को ग्लोरीफाई करते बैठिए. पास्ट को समझने की चेष्टा होती है डीकोलोनियलिटी. दैट यू पुट एन एफर्ट टू अंडरस्टैंड द पास्ट, नॉट टू ग्लोरीफाई द पास्ट, नॉट टू ग्लोरीफाई एवरीथिंग. एंड डीकोलोनियलिटी डज नॉट मीन अतीत के सारे सोशल स्ट्रक्चर्स को आपके प्रेजेंट में और आपके फ्यूचर में उसको इंपोज करना. ये बात नहीं कह रहा हूं मैं, लेकिन अतीत के सिद्धांतों को आप समझिए और उसको उस पर अमल करने की कोशिश कीजिए और अपने पॉलिसी में उसको इंप्लीमेंट करने की कोशिश कीजिए. ये होता है डीकोलोनियलिटी. डीकोलोनियलिटी का मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप वर्णाश्रम और जाति प्रथा को ऐसे फिर से लेके आएंगे कि ब्राह्मण ऊपर बैठेगा. यही लोग कहे जा रहे हैं. मतलब क्या पढ़ते हैं मेरे को समझ में नहीं आता है. आई डोंट नो हाउ दीज पीपल इवन कॉल देमसेल्व्स रीडर्स ऑफ अ बुक. सेकेंड, डीकोलोनियलिटी ये भी नहीं कहता है वेस्ट को पूरी तरह से नकारो. यू नो व्हाई? वेस्ट का जितना भी ज्ञान है उसमें एटलीस्ट 30% ऐसा ज्ञान होगा जो उसने बाकियों से चुराया होगा. तो आप उसको नकारने के चक्कर में आप अपने ही लेट्स से नॉलेज को नकारेंगे एक टाइम पे. व्हाई? इफ द थीफ रिटर्न्स स्टोलन गुड्स एंड यू रिफ्यूज टू टेक इट थिंकिंग दैट दिस इज द थीफ्स गुड्स, अरे भाई ये चुराए धन को वापस कर रहा है, तो ये पहचानना जरूरी है. दैट इज एग्जैक्टली व्हाई डीकोलोनियलिटी इज इंपॉर्टेंट. ओके, सो देयरफॉर it's amazing that the last 3 questions have touched upon such important aspects of my book. लोगों को लग सकता है कि ये पूरा सेट किया गया है और रिग्ड किया गया है. I would request श्रुति to confirm. आप अपने श्रोताओं को और लिसनर्स को बता दीजिए कि ये फिक्स्ड मैच नहीं है. आप उनको बता दीजिए प्लीज.
Yes, sir is exactly correct here. ये फिक्स नहीं है, ये बहुत spontaneous हो रहा है.
My question is very simple actually. So yes, I was following a couple of talks that you did with regard to this book. And the one thing that surprised me, I'm not sure if it surprised you, was the first question that you were asked, which is India, that is Bharat. And then it surprised me because why are we tripping? And we know that the word that was tripping there was not India, but Bharat. Is it ignorance? Is it confusion? Is it complete aloofness? And I'm talking about right and left both. Why are people tripped by this word? It's accepted everywhere in our pujas. In fact, moreover in our family, nobody calls it India. People call it Bharat. So was it surprising for you also, or what? And is that the reason why you named the book so? Thank you.
So these questions are typically a product of everything that you've just said. Aloofness, ignorance, confusion, whatnot, everything under the sun. So one of the conscious decisions for including this in the book, or the title of the book was to say, Bharat hai is desh ka naam, pehle ye jaan lo. Please bring this back into the discourse. And जो constitutional patriots होते हैं उनको मैं बता रहा हूं, constitution भी यही कहता है. और इसके पीछे एक वजह है, क्योंकि इस देश की आत्मा भारतीय है, इंडिया नहीं है. So that is something that I'm trying to say through this book. And the readers of the book will vouch for the fact that almost 90% of the book I've used Bharat, 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 not India. And the reference to India has been very strategic in the book, where I'm referring to the colonizers' view of us. But whenever I speak of us, I only refer to us as Bharat. So that's a conscious decision. 2, I'm not at all surprised that people find this interesting, because it is a testament to the very problem that the book points to, which is coloniality and colonial consciousness. It proves that abundantly. The only good part of these reactions is that people do not have a problem with the use of Bharat. But the fact that they're surprised by the use of Bharat points to the problem. I hope I've answered your question. Next.
So starting में when you were actually presenting your argument, you said that we have equally great science and technologies at the time of Bharatvarsh before colonialism. So I would just like you to give some examples to compare the parallel developments, in science and technology that was happening in the West and that happened in India. You can compare it, let's say, with Newtonian physics or Einstein physics or Gaussian mathematics or the invention of Nikola Tesla or something of that sort, So I just wanted to give
example, I think, should be given by Subhash Kak or by, let's say, Chandrahas Hale, especially in the realm of mathematics. Or you should be talking to Professor C.K. Raju, who has written extensively on this. These are the people who you should be asking these questions. And assuming that this was a bait, so let me respond to the bait in a very clear way. In the book, I have said one thing at the outset, which is that I will present literature which points to the existence of colonial consciousness and how the colonial consciousness has ultimately affected in each realm and what must be the way forward with respect to each realm shall be a discussion undertaken by subject matter experts in each realm. Insofar as my subject is concerned, which happens to be the constitution currently, I will address both coloniality and decoloniality as far as my realm is concerned, is the very specific laser sharp position that I've taken in the book. Now I'll answer your question in a slightly different way, which is, if the literature points to the fact that the first intellectual property thief of the so-called modern world, which is the European colonizer, has been stealing stuff from every jurisdiction, one after the other, I have no reason to operate under the presumption that he is no more a thief when he enters the shores of this country. I will continue to operate under the presumption that he was equally a thief when he entered my land. I have no reason to extend him the benefit of the doubt, which is to say that there is something called as human psychology and consistency in behavior. Someone who has behaved in a certain manner in 3 other continents or 4 other continents, I'm entitled to make the legitimate conclusion and arrive at the legitimate conclusion, iski niyat Bharat mein aake badli nahi hogi. Chor hi hoga. Okay? So that's exactly what he's done. And since he has done that in the realm of spirituality, since he has done that in the realm of laws, since he has done that in the realm of political economic structures, I have no reason to assume that he wouldn't have done that with respect to science. Okay? Second, I will also go to the extent of saying that on this particular aspect, Sri Dharampal has done enough work to speak about the nature of education as well as the scientific systems in this country. And in fact, Mr. Subhash Kak keeps writing on the subject over and over again. That is one person I would certainly ask you to talk, look at his literature, where he speaks of Indic knowledge systems and its acculturation by the West or digestion by the West, to use the phrase of another, Pandit of coloniality. So all I can say is there is expert literature on this, and I do not want to hold forth as an expert on everything under the sun, from gynecology to ethics. I don't wish to do that. I will limit myself to the law. On this particular issue, I have limited myself in the book to the identification of the problem and suggesting a normative, conceptual, framework-based solution which is capable of being applied in different areas. That's the answer to your question. So direct this question to someone who's better qualified to speak on Indic knowledge systems prior to the entry of the Western colonizer and the specific acts of the Indic, of the white colonizer in acculturating, digesting, and stealing Indic knowledge systems. This is a question that you must pose to subject matter experts. Next.
Pranam bhaiya. Actually, I have purchased your book, but didn't have time to read because of board exam. I will read after that. So my question is, so I want to ask you something unrelated to your book. Maybe. So my question is maximum. I think more than 60% of youth and children have idols and hero like Carrie Minati and seductive neo-modern girls.
Okay.
Like Insta, Snapchat, they are posting nudity.
जी.
पूरा जनरेशन ऐसे ही बर्बाद हो गया हमारा, तो फिर ये इंडियनाइजेशन या इंडियन कल्चरल रिवाइवल isn't of any use. Why don't government do anything to stop this? Their minds are filled with inferiority complex in our culture, and sir, this coloniality isn't going to end anyway.
जी. जो आप सवाल कर रहे हैं ना, मुझे लगता है कि आपको एक चिट्ठी लिखना चाहिए, एक ओपन लेटर या एक चिट्ठी लिख देना चाहिए Ministry of Human Resource Development, Ministry of Culture and प्रधानमंत्री जी को, क्योंकि मुझे लगता है उनको आपकी आवाज सुननी चाहिए, क्योंकि ये बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट सवाल आपने पूछा है। तो देखिए, जितने भी एफर्ट्स बाकी लोग लगा रहे हैं, जब तक इसका एक मल्टीप्लायर इफेक्ट क्रिएट नहीं होता है व्यवस्था के द्वारा और प्रणाली के द्वारा, तब तक इसका इम्पैक्ट जो है उतना नहीं होगा जितना होना चाहिए। लेकिन मैं आपको एक दूसरी बात भी बता देता हूं, जो मैंने अभी इस बुक टूर के दौरान मैंने देखा है। ये मैं आसानी से कह सकता हूं कि नहीं मेरा बुक इतना बड़ा हिट हो गया कि सब लोग मेरी बुक को पढ़ रहे हैं, ये बात मैं नहीं कहना चाहता, क्योंकि मैं इस बात से कॉन्फिडेंस मुझे मिलता है कि 15 से लेके 25 या 26 और लेट्स से 15 to 30, उस 15 साल के बैंडविड्थ में, उस बैंड में ऐसे इतने लोग आए हैं जो इस लिटरेचर के बारे में बात करते हैं जिसको मैं चाहता हूं कि वो पढ़ें, जैसे विक्रम संपत हो या फिर डॉक्टर मीनाक्षी जैन हो। इनफैक्ट एक 18 साल के लड़के ने मुझे ईमेल लिखा है डॉक्टर बाल गंगाधर के काम के बारे में, जिसके बारे में मैंने सिर्फ 3 साल पहले पढ़ा था, एंड आई एम 35 years old. ओके, सो दैट गिव्स मी द कॉन्फिडेंस दैट निराशा के लिए जहां पे एक स्कोप है, आशा के लिए भी उतना ही स्कोप है, एटलीस्ट थोड़ा बहुत तो है। द थिंग इज, निराशा इस बात से आती है, आई डोंट नो इफ दैट इज आती है और आता है, लीव इट फॉर द हिंदी स्पीकर्स टू एक्चुअली कंफर्म दैट, बट स्टेट का सपोर्ट अगर इसमें होता है, जैसे ऐसे बहुत सारे स्कॉलर्स हैं जिनको लेट्स से मुझे लगता है एक मेन स्ट्रीम पोजीशन देना चाहिए, ओके, जिनके काम को लोगों के सामने रखना चाहिए ताकि they can create more people, because you see we are in the process of losing several stalwarts. We have to make sure that उनके काम को कोई आगे ले जा सके, वरना जितना भी उन्होंने सीखा है, एक बात है उनके नॉलेज को आगे लेके जाना, लेकिन जितना भी उन्होंने सीखा है by way of process, by way of training, that also needs to go forward. That is the only way to keep this particular resistance alive. So it's a genuine request. मैं आपसे rhetorical request नहीं कर रहा हूं, मैं यहाँ पे मजाक नहीं उड़ा रहा हूं, मैं ये कह रहा हूं कि आपको एक लेटर लिखना चाहिए, और वो भी हिंदी में, ये बताते हुए कि आपकी जनरेशन किस चीज से गुजर रही है, कि सोशल मीडिया का क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ रहा है आप पे, एप्स का क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ रहा है, पबजी का क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ा है, टिकटॉक का क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ा है, लेट्स से ओपन एक्सेस टू सर्टेन मटेरियल का क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ा है, ये आपको बताना चाहिए, बिकॉज this would be the voice of your generation speaking to the establishment saying आप प्लीज इसके बारे में कुछ कहिए। अगर पेरेंट्स कहते हैं तो कुछ और होता है, लेकिन जब बच्चे खुद कहते हैं तो उसका इम्पैक्ट अलग होता है। आप प्लीज ये कीजिए, इट इज माई हम्बल रिक्वेस्ट, एंड परहैप्स यू कैन ट्रीट दिस एज एन ओपन पेटिशन, ओपन लेटर, लेकिन आपकी तरफ से एक चिट्ठी तो जानी चाहिए। इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, बिकॉज आई वॉन्ट एटलीस्ट लेट्स से द एस्टैब्लिशमेंट टू नो that children themselves are concerned about the society that they will grow up in if their peers are constantly stuck in this defeatism, in the self-loathing attitude, coupled with exposure to obscene material. That is a deadly combination. That's a terrible combination. You're hoping to create a society which is safe for all genders, especially for women. But if this is the kind of material that they're going to be exposed to, I'm really not sure we are actually heading in a direction which is safe for women. That's all I can say. अगर ये patriarchy है तो मैं yes, I can be accused of patriarchy. मैं मान लेता हूँ अपने दोष को.
Two questions. What can we do? What else can I do? And what can we do? I have sent missed calls when I was asked to. I signed petitions when I was asked to. And I sent money to Indie Collective to get the temples free from the state control. Okay. What do we do to ensure that the Supreme Court takes up this petition on freeing Indian Hindu temples? The second question is, how will decoloniality impact women? Because how will they continue to be in that decolonial world that we want to create? Will they be full participants at every level of political process, from the local level to the highest national level?
Grateful, ma'am.
Thank
you.
I
ask you
so
to
much.
not please don't shut out your video. I'd like to engage with you on this. Okay,
sure,
so please
sure.
don't. Okay, I think it's an extremely important question that you've asked. Okay,
right.
So let me take the second question first, and then I'll
right.
come to the first question.
Right. Thank you. Yes.
So, ma'am, as far as the second question is concerned, I don't want to suffer from a savior complex as a man. Okay, therefore, my suggestion would be that you interact with perhaps Ms. Neha Srivastava, who runs a foundation called Shaktitva. Okay. And quite a few, let's say, Hindu female scholars who are working in the realm of what does it mean to be a Hindu woman in terms of both a feminist perspective, as well as what does it mean if a Hindu society were to be created on ideal lines or idealistic lines, would women have the rights that they enjoy today is a question that they are working on. So ideally, this is a question that must be answered by women who believe that a dharmic system is not antithetical to women's rights. That's one. Okay. So I'm sure that your own gender is capable of asking and answering this question. That's the first response. Okay. Second, I will limit my answer to only one thing, that to assume that decoloniality would translate to the Parda system being brought back, or let's say the right to education being denied, or women being forced to let's say take up only domestic roles, is perhaps significantly contributed to by coloniality itself. Okay. And maybe some of these practices are a product of the multiple waves of brutality, savagery, and colonization. Okay. For instance, let it be child marriage, or for that matter, the Parda system, were primarily done when you're facing a savage horde which believes in and celebrates necrophilia. Okay. So therefore, some of these practices are to be attributed to that. Be that as it may, it is not my case. I repeat, it is not my case that every practice which does not have any contemporary purchase should be brought back in the name of decoloniality. That is not my position, ma'am. Okay. And I do believe that as a society, we certainly have a red line, an inbuilt Lakshman Rekha, where we know what can be brought back and what cannot be brought back. Okay. I will put my faith in the Hindu conscience that it knows where to draw a Lakshman Rekha. And in any case, I'm more than happy to cede space on the subject, not cede space. I will simply say, I don't want to be the one to discuss this subject when there are better qualified women to actually take up this particular subject. So why don't women actually have a discussion on this and ask themselves whether decoloniality will result in truncation of space for women, or will it actually lead to elimination of the belief that this culture is fundamentally patriarchal? Okay. That is an issue that I'm certainly interested in. This constant allegation that the Hindu society is patriarchal and its culture and its entire worldview is rooted in misogyny is an issue that I certainly have a problem with. Okay. Because I've only seen strong women around me. So I don't know where the sense of misogyny and patriarchy comes from. So I would certainly want this question to be addressed in a scholarly fashion. Now, well, yes, ma'am, please go on.
No, I do not believe that Hindu culture itself, because had that been my understanding of Hindu traditions and the dharmic tradition, I would not have, had a minute to say that I want to chuck everything. I do not believe that at all. I think it's a very strong, civilizationally, a very strong position on women and women's Shakti, and I am completely a votary of that. And that is why I'm here, even in this session. My concern is if we talk about education, and if we go back to the time, even pre-Middle Eastern consciousness, if we go to that point, I feel that the kind of literature that is taught to us, the Shastric traditions, Dharma Shastric traditions, the Smritis, the idea is that the primacy is given to the man, and the women do not have, for instance, the full ritual rights that men have. And the Karam Kand is completely in the hands of men if we take the Brahmanical tradition. Okay. So that is my concern, that it should not be that sure. Yeah.
So let me respond to that. So there are two streams of responses to that. Okay. The first response is on the secular front or the non-religious front. And the second response is on the religious front. Okay. Now, in the book, I've clearly said that who we were as a people is better understood prior to the entry of the Islamic invader and the Christian colonizer. Okay. However, it is not my position to say that we must recreate that society in the current time. Please understand that, right? So I've said that, right? So the distinction, I'm sure, is clear, right? Okay, great. Thank you. Now that distinction is clear, let us look at certain facts. Is it our case that even until the time that until let's say 1947 or even before 1600s or 1700s when the British man came,
just to say that I have read the book. Just to say that I have read the book.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So I don't believe that the history of this country shows that prior to the entry of the Christian colonizer, women did not have any, let's say, integral roles or let's say commanding roles or leadership roles that they played, when in fact there are examples to the contrary. Okay. However, I will caveat this position with the very clear rider that whether these were exceptions or the norm, I am not sure of. Okay. And therefore, on this particular subject, I will genuinely, with humility, leave it to scholars to decide this, because I'm not trained in the subject. Okay. So, which is why I reiterate the answer to the previous question, that this is, let's say, an inquiry for subject matter scholars to take up. Okay. Now, second, coming to the religious aspect, which is perhaps the trickier part. Okay. If you were to ask me, I am someone who would typically cede my space on that particular issue to the Shastras when it comes to religious institutions. And I understand that perhaps this may be a point of disagreement between your position and my position. There's a decent chance on that. Okay. But maybe I believe in continuity of certain core aspects. Okay. And I'm unapologetic about it. Now, whether this is exactly what the society needs to follow at a large scale, I will leave that to the larger society and its conscience to discuss. However, I will not allow the state to play a role in this, because the state is mischievous. Okay. I will not allow the judiciary to play a role in this, because the judiciary cannot be trusted with such a sensitive issue. It does not have the expertise for this. Okay. So, acknowledging that you and I perhaps disagree on the central principle of your question, the one thing that both of us can perhaps agree on is that there is no role for the state in this. And I would want this to be discussed only by the society.
Right.
At the very least, for the state to earn its right in this particular discussion, it must shed its Hinduphobic attitude before it talks to us. Okay. Right. And two, it must stop treating us and looking at us through the Western lens before it enters this discussion. True. It must stop looking at the Hindu society as a drug addict who needs reform and intervention from the state. Okay. Once the state proves its credentials on these aspects, then I'm happy to give the state a seat at the table. Until then, I don't want it entering this particular structure at all. Okay. Yeah. Now, your other question on temple freedom, which was your first question. Okay. Yeah. One, this is an important clarification that I have to give. I am not answerable on behalf of Indie Collective simply because I'm not a trustee.
Yeah.
I happen to be only a legal mentor on certain cases. Now, just caveat is important because quite a few people assume that I'm a trustee, so I'm just clarifying that, or rather, I'm using your question to make the clarification. Okay. Now, coming to temple freedom, I believe that this issue, thanks to the efforts of all these people who have been working for decades now, has gradually gained traction. That finally we are talking about it at such length. I don't think this is the scale of the discussion on temple freedom 4 years ago. At least national media was not discussing it. Okay. Until 2016-17, you did not find these issues getting any kind of traction from national media. Now, Times now wants to talk about it. CNN News 18 wants to talk about it. Republic wants to talk about it. Everybody seems to want to talk about it. Clearly, something's afoot, according to me, when these channels decide to talk about it. Okay. Whether this results in an ideal outcome is for time to decide. I will wait and watch, because I will not celebrate prematurely, knowing how this society and this country functions. Okay. But we are certainly moving perhaps in a positive direction, is the hope. Now, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, I believe that in the coming days, and without, let's say, making any bombastic statements, perhaps there will be greater activity on this front. I will not be in a position to reveal anything beyond that. I will leave this at this. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I hope I've managed to answer your questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, my question is, yesterday CGI and Envy Ramanna said that we need to Indianize our law constitution. So what are your views? How we can Indianize our constitution? What are the reforms we need?
तो एक करेक्शन ये है सर कि उन्होंने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के बारे में नहीं कहा था, उन्होंने ही सिंपली सेड अबाउट द लीगल सिस्टम. अगर वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के बारे में बोलते तो ये और भी बड़ा धमाका होता। ओके, तो सो ये करेक्शन बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है, क्योंकि जज भी पहले वकील होते हैं, तो उनके मुंह से जब निकला है तो आप उसको थोड़ा सेफली और करेक्टली इंटरप्रेट कीजिए। दूसरा, एज आई सेड, आपके पहले भी 2-3 लोगों ने ये सवाल किया था और मैंने जवाब में ये कहा था, मैं अभी एक प्रिस्क्रिप्शन मोड में नहीं हूं, मेरे पास अभी एक सीधा सुझाव नहीं है। वो दूसरी पुस्तक में आएगा, तो उसका आप थोड़ा उसकी प्रतीक्षा कीजिए। जब वो आएगा, आपके सवाल का जवाब मैं, या फिर उस आपके प्रश्न का उत्तर मैं बेहतर दे पाऊंगा। ठीक है, तो प्लीज अब के लिए मुझे क्षमा कर दीजिए, क्योंकि मेरे पास अभी उसका कोई उत्तर नहीं है। अभी उस पर काम चल रहा है। जब ये खत्म होगा या फिर जब ये अंत होगा, तब मैं इसकी बात करूंगा या चर्चा करूंगा।